The decision to do a controlled release of the chemicals that were being transported in that Norfolk Southern train that derailed, that was the best option of bad options. That's what was announced by the mayor per his consultation with ostensibly federal officials, by both governors DeWine of Ohio and Shapiro of Pennsylvania. But then just recently, Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania seemed to reverse course when he sent this letter to the Department of Transportation, as recounted last night by Tucker Carlson,
claiming that Norfolk Southern was, quote, unwilling to explore or articulate alternative courses of action to their proposed vent and burn. It was very obvious, he says, that there was probably a, quote, safer overall approach for first responders, residents, and the environment.
So was that the best of bad options? The governor seems to be saying two things. And what do we do now? Should we stay? Should we go? Should we drink the water? Should we send our kids to school? Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio on MSNBC yesterday.
So if it were your family, Governor, you'd be okay sending everybody back home?
Yeah, look, I mean, we indicated that. We're going to continue to test the air. We're going to continue to test the water. But what that is indicating is that it is very, very safe.
Not buying it.
Doesn't inspire a ton of confidence. Would you go home? Yes or no? We indicated we would. For more on this, trying to make sense of it, pleased to be joined by Dr. William Sawyer. He's a professional toxicologist with extensive experience in public health and forensic toxicology and specialized expertise in causation analyses. William Sawyer, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. So the original decision after the derailment to do a controlled release, the explanation that was given, it was either we do that controlled release or we wait for it to explode, and that would have been worse. But now the governor of Pennsylvania is seeming to suggest that there was some unnamed better option potentially available. What's your assessment?
Well, it's very clear that the option was incorrect. Let me explain it this way. There were primarily 5 chemical ingredients involved. One of those chemicals is highly volatile. That's vinyl chloride. It boils at around 8 degrees Fahrenheit. The other chemicals, for the most part, are reasonably stable. Some of those acrylates are don't even have a boiling point. They're just sort of a thick, sludgy mix. So the controlled burn, the problem is with a controlled burn, and I don't even agree that it was controlled. It was really an out-of-control burn. But at any rate, that releases what we call a plume, a pyrolysis plume. Pyrolysis means that chemicals that are formed when you take these 5 ingredients and mix them together in a partial combustion situation, it forms other byproducts. We call these pyrolysis products. And they travel long distance, whereas if there was no controlled burn, there would be a very high point source of pollution. So normally what happens before such decisions are made, an expert chemist in pyrology and expert toxicologists are brought in as consultants and determine whether or not a controlled burn would be feasible. And in this case, the wrong decision was made.
So, the mayor at the town hall the other night taught, and I'm sure he was just repeating what he was told. I'm not blaming him, but this is what he explained to the residents. Said if we had not done the controlled burn, then there would have been a polymerization of the chemicals causing an explosion. Number one, is that true? Was that a possibility? And then number two, then if the control release wasn't proper and if this was a potential ticking bomb, what should have been done?
Well, normally there are foams and extinguishing materials that put the fire out, basically. And so I really can't speak on the the degree of the fire. I was not there. But what I can tell you is that we have a two different world situation. We have testing of air and water, which is reported to be negative. And that is a completely different concern than the long-term effect of these pyrolysis products that form, and they persist within the dust, within the household dust, on the floor, the baby's hands and mouth activity ingest that dust. Pregnant females ingest it. And that dust, that material that has fallen out, the deposition of that material, is a completely different situation than testing air and water for acute toxicity. In other words, we have the short-term effects versus long-terms. Now, in this case, we actually have adverse health effects that are consistent with carbonyl chloride, that is phosgene gas, a Schedule III chemical warfare agent. I mean, we have health effects that are consistent with that. So I would be very concerned as to whether the testing that's been done is actually adequate and whether OSHA method 61 is being used. Are they actually drawing several hundred liters of air to reach possible detection limits that are needed? There's a lot of questions here, but the main point is there's two different worlds. There's the acute air-water situation of direct exposure, and then there's the long-term aftermath of this situation, which is, in my mind, a more serious problem, actually.
So hypothetically, say a woman just gave birth to a baby and she lives in that town, and she was concerned about her health, obviously the baby's health. Should they move? I mean, is there any, what would you recommend they do?
Oh, definitely any pregnant female or young children between 0 and 3, which are especially sensitive to the neurodevelopmental toxicity of some of these agents, should not be there. And especially due to the hand-mouth activity of children who take in 50 milligrams, sometimes up to 100 milligrams of dust per day.
Wow.
So we don't know what's in that dust yet. We don't know if there's...
You mentioned, sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned the symptoms that are being reported from residents are consistent with the toxicity that you're talking about. So you're talking about like residents are reporting like burning lungs, migraines, rashes developing, those sort of symptoms?
Yes. The fact that there are such a significant piece of the exposed population presenting with respiratory symptoms, that is a concern. And that can be from direct inhalation of the plume itself, or it can also be related to the deposition of particulate matter that has fallen into these homes and onto surfaces. I would not only advise pregnant females or children ages, newborns up to 3 years, of avoiding the area. I would also strongly avoid going in and taking personal items and, basically loading all these personal items and moving out with them, because they are likely to be contaminated.
Well, if that's the case, then why should anybody stay? Do they not risk permanent respiratory damage?
Well, not necessarily respiratory. Let me explain it this way.
Okay.
There was 1/10 million gallons of vinyl chloride. Vinyl chloride is what we call a chlorine donor. In other words, in chemical reactions, that vinyl chlorine can actually donate chlorine into the chemical reaction. And in fires of this sort with ethyl hexyl acrylate, butyl acrylate, and these other chemicals, aromatic hydrocarbons and polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbons are formed. These PAHs, we call them, fall out in the emission, and they accumulate in the dust. The other concern is that dioxins can be formed from the donation of chloride in the presence of these PAHs. And if dioxins or dibenzofurans are formed, those are also extremely persistent in dust and are very powerful Class A known human carcinogens. So until this is fully assessed, I would strongly advise avoiding any area where there has been significant dust deposition fallout. I would avoid that.
And so and what
Sounds like
yeah,
they should
they
evacuate the
they
town.
set like a 1 mile radius. Is that big enough?
Again, in a situation like this, back when I worked for the government in the Department of Health, we would have air modelers, and then privately I've done a number of similar disasters as this, where we have an air modeling expert who maps out the plume and the concentration throughout that plume. And we don't know what exactly how far this plume has reached. It hasn't been assessed yet.
Well, they were warning residents in West Virginia, when you see the plume, go inside and shut your doors. But it sounds like they should evacuate the whole town and that whole area. I mean, is the government being, just putting people's lives on the line here?
Well, let me explain it this way. The test regarding the deposition of dust, these are highly specialized tests that take several weeks to run. And I suspect that EPA probably has or are conducting such tests, but turnaround time is slow, especially for dioxin, dibenzofurans, polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbons, those PAHs I talked about. Those are all things that are of great concern in a mixture of this sort, but will take several weeks for results. And
So then, if you were asked the question that Governor DeWine was asked, if you lived in East Palestine, would you go home? What's your answer?
I would at this point. I would evacuate at this point. I would not go home, and I would be extremely cautious with little children who have hand-to-mouth activity. And that could present a significant dose from the surface dust from the fallout, and that must be avoided until the testing is done and we know exactly what we're dealing with. All we know at this point is that we have a chemical mixture, a brew, and a uncontrolled burn. This is not an injection burn with known stoichiometric amounts of air. This is just basically a black mushroom plume that went up and came back down. And where that plume came down and impacted the residential environments is a very serious matter.
And who made? I mean, so how does the decision making happen here? Is this the decision making on what to do initially? So the decision to do the controlled burn, is that ultimately an EPA call? Is that state, federal, EPA, along with Norfolk Southern, and local officials coming together? How does that process play out? So who's the shot caller that made that decision?
I have not found any evidence whatsoever that this went under review by pyrolysis experts and toxicologists. The transportation people, as far as I know, made the decision. And
Department of Transportation, it's their call?
Yeah.
Mayor Pete.
Ultimately.
Uh-huh. Huh, interesting. William Sawyer, professional toxicologist with extensive experience in public health and forensic toxicology, as you heard. Also specialized expertise in causation analyses. Dr. Sawyer, thanks so much for your insights. Really appreciate it. Very helpful.
Okay, pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
In our experience, money decisions are as much heart as they are head. That's why it's important to listen to both. For over 100 years, Thrivent has helped clients with advice, investments, insurance, banking, and generosity, so they can live a life that's full as well as fulfilling. Let's go beyond the numbers and have a heart-to-heart about your finances. See how your money can do more at Thrivent.com. Thrivent is the marketing name for Thrivent Financial for Lutherans. Thrivent.com/disclosures.
I can't wait. I'm doing it. Getting my Balance of Nature out of the locker there. 6 capsules.
Before Balance of Nature, can I just translate what Dr. Sawyer had to say for our audience?
Yeah.
Run for your lives! No, I'm kidding. But how good
my God.
That was really helpful. He was very, very good.
Very good. And government officials, aren't they listening